The European Union has been left red-faced after Britain's turned their back on the bloc, with the latest trade figures revealing that the UK purchased around 11.4% less of Brussels products than last year. New data compiled by Facts4EU, a Brexit research group, suggests that between January and February this year, sales to the UK from the EU were down by approximately £6 billion (€6.88 billion) from the same period in 2019. Last year, the total for the first 2 months of sales was £49.3 billion (€56.6 billion). The analysis, Facts4EU argue, shows that after Boris Johnson and his Conservative Party finally concluded Brexit, and the UK's exit from the EU, Britons are now opting to shop elsewhere as the nation begins life outside the bloc. Facts4EU studied the data released by the EU Commission in April, which also showed that the UK's drop in purchasing from Brussels was more than 3 times the drop of any other major country. The EU Commission's figures showed that the UK is second only to the US in terms of money spent purchasing from the bloc. In 2019, the UK bought £277 billion (€319 billion) worth of goods from the EU 27 nations, which represents around 15% of global sales for member state nations. That number, Facts4EU suggests, is 61% more than the EU 27 countries sold to China. Commenting on the analysis, Facts4EU said, as a trading bloc and potential customer for countries around the world, the EU is suddenly much smaller as a result of the departure of the United Kingdom. Who knows if the latest drop in EU sales to the United Kingdom is significant or not? We tend to think it might be. Let's face it, the European Union has not exactly covered itself in glory in its dealings with the UK over the past few years since we voted to leave. The British are a tolerant people and do not rise easily to anger. Nevertheless, there comes a point when enough is enough. The group added, the ordinary, democratic people in the UK, whether they voted leave or remain, felt that after more than 3 years of nonsense from the EU, and a longer period of other nonsense from the Remainer governments of Mr Cameron and Mrs May and from the Remainer civil service and establishment as a whole, enough was enough. The public appear to agree with Facts4EU, as many took to the group's website to discuss their own buying habits since the UK's departure from the EU on January 31. Many said, as a result of the referendum, they wanted to purchase more items from within the UK and other Commonwealth countries. One wrote, after seeing how the EU treated us after the referendum, I started buying British or Commonwealth whenever I could. I am sorry for the people in the EU countries with whom I have no quarrel, but they must get rid of the horrible people running the EU. If they don't, then I think more people in Britain will stop buying EU products. Another said, EU, this is just the start. You carry on angering British people and see what happens to your sales to us. Britain is currently in a tense standoff with the EU over its trade negotiations. The UK is looking to get a trade deal concluded with the bloc by December 31, but severe concerns over the EU's unwillingness to continue discussions have erupted, mainly over the crisis associated with the current pandemic.